Hello,
Hi,
Julia
Paulette.
Cameron. How are you?
Good.
Um, I was wondering what your artist date was this week.
Aha. And I I don't think I've taken it yet, uh, but it will be a trip uh, to a store that sells cards, uh,
Mm-hmm. Love that.
racks and racks of cards,
Mm-hmm.
and I tend to go in there and spend $75 getting cards to send to my friends.
I
Uh,
love that.
but it's a very good artist date. It's uh, really festive.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Um, and just after reading your book, and listening to some of your interviews, I'm really interested in all these. I very similarly to you, I left religion, and then when I first started reading your book, I was like, praying, okay, like I'm on board, I'm ready, and so I think all these terms that we've heard so much, we can start to have our own definition, like you said, your own definition of God. And I was wondering what your definition of grace is for an artist.
Aha. I think it's sense of a benevolent something
Mm,
where you feel uh, that you are perhaps being guided and shown,
mm,
and where you feel that your work has a future.
mm,
So I think grace has to do with optimism.
mm. And why do you feel like we need prayer when we're failing, when we feel like, maybe we're coming out of a big failure, what we perceive as a failure, or we feel like we're not where we want to be? Why do we need prayer in that time?
Well, I think we need prayer all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that we particularly need it when we're feeling blue,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes practice uh, to to feel more optimistic. And so
Mm,
I think when you're coming out of a depression, uh, you reach out uh, to a higher power that
mm-hmm.
hopefully you've already established a relationship with.
And what do you think prayer does for us when we're succeeding, when we feel like we're on a high, we're kind of winning at this artistic life in some way?
Well, I think prayer gives us a sense of security.
Mm,
And I think when we're succeeding, we sometimes get very nervous. Uh,
mm,
we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I think when you're succeeding and waiting for the other shoe to drop, uh, you have edginess and nerves. Uh,
mm.
I think that edginess and nerves are two of the things that prayer most effectively combats.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I've felt that in practicing what you talk about in the book. Um, and what would you say is a prayer for rejection when you receive a rejection?
Well, this is when we need to think of the higher power as being wiser than we are ourselves.
Mm,
We've made a prayer of petition, we've asked for something, and we've been told no.
mm-hmm,
And we have to then say, well, the higher power has greater grace, greater wisdom, greater insight, greater encouragement. And I think a simple prayer to say is, Thy will be done.
mm. I'm interested in the role that that community might play with prayer. You know, heard you say that you can ask your friends to pray for you and talk about the the community that helped you with your moves. What role does community and spirituality play in your life?
In my personal life?
Or in any artist's life, really?
Well, I think that community gives us a sense of hope,
Mm.
that we hold on to our friends' faith when we are wobbly, and when we ask our friends,
Mm.
please pray for me, and they say, I will,
Mm.
we can feel a certain steadiness come over us, a certain calm, and I think that having a group of friends that we routinely ask for prayers uh, is very important. I
Mhm.
have I have my friend Laura, who's been my friend for 30 years. I have my friend Jacob, who's been my friend for 2 years. I have my friend Scotty, who gets up every morning at 3:30 and says prayers for ease and joy.
Mhm.
And my friend Jennifer, who white lights me. And I think all of these prayers are worthy. And I find uh, that I often think my friends, quote, pray better than I do. And so I think it's important to sort of behoove ourselves of the grace that's available.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. During the pandemic, a friend and I started an online meditation and writing group when we called it a very important meeting. And it's based on the morning pages, because it's 10 minutes of meditation and 45 minutes of writing time together, and then we talk for about 15 minutes afterward. And I have before gotten a terrible rejection or really bad feedback during the meeting and been like, I'm so glad I'm here with my friends. And as soon as we all come back, I'm going to be like, you guys will never believe what I just got. And I'd love to know what role meditation takes. This morning, I led us through a meditation that was inspired by your book and kind of asking whatever, higher power we believe in for guidance. But as far as pretty traditional meditation, does that play a role in your prayer life or in your spiritual life with writing?
No,
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think of my morning pages as a bona fide way to meditate.
Mm.
And that by the time I've spent 45 minutes writing out pages, I am calm, receptive, guided. And I often feel, well, I think morning pages are meditation, but it's not as good, quote, a meditation as maybe sitting for 20 minutes meditating would be. But over the years, I've found that it's very effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've sort of dropped the rock and said, yes, morning pages are prayer and meditation.
Mm-hmm. So you often come to spirituality through a lens of creativity. Do you feel that people who are kind of living a spiritual life should incorporate creativity into their spirituality? Let's say someone kind of identifies more as a spiritual person than a creative person. What do you think they're missing by leaving out creativity?
Well, I think that if you work on your creativity, your spirituality increases.
Mm.
And if you work on your spirituality, your creativity increases. So I see the two as going together hand in glove. And
Mm,
I feel that people who reach consciously for creativity
mm,
are maybe a little step ahead.
mhm.
And does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that. It's that same force that through the green fruit fuse drives the flower is both the, the creative force and just the life force that people feel during meditation.
Yes, I love that line from Dylan Thomas, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And
Hmm.
I believe that when I pray, I'm praying to that creative energy.
Hmm. One thing that I found that I could get on board with was that, kind of believing that we are not like, we didn't arrive in the universe, we are of it, and that very force is our higher self. Do you feel like there is how do you feel about the separation between that force and you as a person? Do you feel that that is a part of you?
Well, speaking for myself, I conceptualize it as something a little bit separate from myself. I believe that it infuses me. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that it inspires me. I believe that it encourages me. Uh, but I experience it sort of as an outside force uh,
Mm-hmm.
rather than an inner force. I hope that's not
Men-
too
oh,
disappointing
God.
an answer.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think for everyone, it can be, I loved do you like Tara Brach? Have you heard of her?
Uh-huh.
She talked about a situation in which there was a multi-religious group and they were trying to come up with a word for this, what one might call God, and they landed on the great mystery. And so I really love that phrasing. And for all of us, it is this great mystery. So I think that the way we conceptualize it, it's whatever works for us. um in many other religions there's a ceremony or rituals that we all do together. Would you envision some kind of gathering that is spiritual for writers? If you had to imagine a spiritual gathering for writers, what would that look like for you, or artists in general?
Well, I think it's something that I conceptualize as an individual matter.
Mm,
And that we have individuals seeking guidance about their creativity, doing morning pages, taking
mm,
artist dates, moving forward, and that as we move forward individually, we move forward collectively.
mm,
So I don't start out as a collective, but I end up there.
mm-hmm. I definitely feel like I've felt a power in the room when hearing an amazing craft talk or a very beautiful poem. There is a beauty to gathering together as artists. For me, does that play any role? Like I know you kind of exchange poems once a week, but do you enjoy gathering with other artists, or do you mostly just focus on the self and at each individual path?
Well, I'm very lucky. I have two people in my life, Emma Lively, a composer, and
Mm-hmm.
Nick Kapuscinski, a poet and actor. And I have daily contact with them. And it gives me the spark of optimism, and it gives me great encouragement. And I feel like I feel like without them, I would be missing an important piece of my life.
Mm. Love that. Do you feel that there's a way in which artists kind of, if religion has this idea of sin, is there a way in which you feel like artists can be sinning, or is there an artist sin?
I think it comes back down to faith and confidence.
Mm.
I think that as artists, as we try to trust our unfolding, we're given a sense of support. And when we doubt and entertain doubt, we have a sense of lack. And I think that sin might be defined as lack.
Mm-hmm. So do you find that do you ever feel doubt, or, as someone who's turning 40 and hasn't finished her first novel yet, I definitely feel that way of lost, or, and I can definitely get a little more attitude of thy will be done. Do you ever fall into that?
So is your question, if I'm following it, do I have doubt?
Yes.
And I try not to.
Mm-hmm.
I practice a program of guidance, which I've talked about in the book, and I say, can I hear about X? And then I listen. And I hear something pretty direct and pretty simple about X. And so then I think, oh, maybe that's too good to be true. And I start to court doubt. And what I do then is I go back to guidance and say, again, can I hear about X? And if the guidance holds steady, then I think, well, perhaps I better trust it.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest leap you've ever taken based on advice from guidance?
I think it was writing the current book, Seeking Wisdom. I asked guidance, what should I write about next? And the answer came back, prayer. And I thought, oh no, I'm not holy enough to write about prayer. That should be for somebody who's far more spiritual than I am. And I asked again, please, what should I write about? And the guidance came back, prayer. Prayer is a worthy topic. You're a worthy writer and you'll have much to say. So I started trying to write about prayer, and I decided at the beginning that I would tell my own prayer story, which is the story of being cornered into prayer in order to stay sober. And when I found myself cornered into prayer, I began to pray more colloquially. I had been raised Catholic and we had formal prayers, and I was never very comfortable with them. So when I was trying to pray colloquially, I found myself talking to God with candor and saying, I'm miserable. Could you help me, please? And that seemed to me to be a much more effective way to pray.
How would you describe the feeling after a prayer?
Calm.
Mm. Just calm and trusting.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the people who are like, what about that, tip of the bell curve, terrible human experience that some people experience? Where is the guidance in that? And, why is that allowed to happen by forces higher than ourselves?
So is your question, what do we feel when terrible things happen?
Yeah, just trying to keep that faith of like, thy will be done in the face of, things as terrible as the Holocaust or, children growing up in war, things like that. Keeping that faith despite how terrible some things can get in the world.
So is your question, do we keep that faith?
Do we keep that faith? And if so, how?
And I think that again comes back to prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can pray to be led and guided.
Mm.
We can pray to have our attitudes adjusted.
Yes, I know that prayer. And kind of sit in the mystery of, we don't know why things that terrible happen, but beautiful things happen as well.
Yes.
Yeah. The world is quite crazy. So what was what was the effect that you hope this book has out in the world?
Seeking wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's my hope that it will make prayer seem more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning of the book, I talk about God concepts. And many of us were raised with what I would call a negative God concept.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a concept of God as an authoritarian figure,
Mm-hmm.
stern, forbidding, vengeful, jealous. And we have a creativity myth that supports this. We have a beautiful day in paradise, and Eve eats the apple and hands it to Adam, and the skies part, and a booming voice says, "How dare you? I told you not to eat from that tree. From now on, you'll bear your children in pain and suffering. In fact, the two of you won't even get along." So I think we need to have a positive God concept, and we can design this ourselves. We can
Mm-hmm.
number from 1 to 10 and say, what traits would you like God to have?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of traits could you do business with God?
Mm-hmm.
So if God is encouraging, supportive, humorous, you begin to say, well, maybe I can say a prayer to that God. So I'm hoping that the book opens the door to a colloquial conversation with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about 3 different kinds of prayer. Prayers of petition, which are pretty straightforward and obvious. We call them Santa Claus prayers. Prayers of gratitude, where we say specifically the things in our personal lives that we feel grateful for. And then prayers of praise, where we're sort of saying, wow, God, you're so groovy.
And if someone were a brand new artist, what advice would you have for them beyond, morning pages, the walks, artist states, and prayer?
I wouldn't have advice beyond that. Those tools are tools that work. And
Mhm.
I would encourage people to undertake morning pages, artist dates, walks, and guidance. And apart from that, I have a tool at the, I think it's on page 158, maybe in the Artist's Way. It's called Blasting Through Blocks.
Mm.
And it's a negative inventory of my fears and angers in connection with this project are. And when
Mm.
you write those out, you ventilate them.
Mhm. And your morning pages at this point must be quite a volume. Where do you store them?
I have a big bookcase here in my library that's stuffed with morning pages, but I also have permission to throw them away.
Wow. Okay.
So I don't think it's necessary to cling to pages. I think pages will cling to you.
Mhm. And what's been one of your most powerful spiritual experiences as an artist?
Um, I have a website called juliacameronlive.com. And it has a pull down factor. It says Julia's art. And
Mm.
you pull it down and it says plays, poetry, music.
Mm.
And I have a play on there called Love in the DMZ,
Mm.
which is a production that we did on Zoom in the middle of pandemic. And it stars my friend Nick Kapuscinski. And
Mhm.
I found watching this play to be a very powerful spiritual experience. And I felt like, oh, and I wrote that. How surprising and wonderful.
Mhm. I love that when you like experience your own art and you're like, oh, that's how I feel like you know when something's done, when you feel it. So it was just a very powerful spiritual experience in the way that you wanted to affect the viewer.
Yes.
Wow, love that. Um, well, is there anything else you wanted to mention? I know we had earmarked half an hour, so that's our time.
Aha.
Mhm.
Well, I just want to say, please do morning pages. They will lead you forward.
Got them right here. What I need to do more is the artist dates and the walks. I have a really hard time prioritizing them, and I need to do it.
Well, I think it's common to have a hard time taking an artist date.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I say I have a tool for you, it's a nightmare. You'll have to get up 45 minutes early and you'll have to work. We say work. I get work. I'll work on my creativity. And so we undertake morning pages. But then if I say, now I have another tool, once a week, I want you to go out by yourself and play.
Mm.
Well, then this is where our skepticism comes in. We sort of cock our head to one side and cross our arms and say, play. I don't see what play has to do with creativity. And I usually gently say, well, we have an expression, the play of ideas.
Mm.
And that's a literal prescription. Play
Mm-hmm.
will have ideas.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I will take them more seriously for sure. Got it direct from the source. Well, thank you for the beautiful effect you've had on my life. And thank you so much for your work and for being a guiding light for the rest of us. And yeah, just thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Have a great day, Julia. Thank you.